What's up everyone and welcome back to HateWatchers. Today we're going over the season finale episode of the third season of The Mandalorian, entitled The Return. Let's get right into it. Spoilers ahead. We pick up with Ho-Katan running away from her responsibilities as ruler of Mandalore, and Axe Woves is headed to the fleet to let everyone know to come down to the surface to play some games. Din is being pulled away for some kinky stuff when baby IG-12 saves him from the troopers and from COVID with some disinfectant spray. And Ho approves.
Stay safe.
Moff Gustavo Fring can barely contain his excitement as his game of hide-and-seek gets underway. Mando and Grogu are in on the hide-and-seek game, but Mando, tired of the Moff's winning streak, asks R5 to help him cheat. R5 briefly contemplates suicide to get out of this show. Woves reaches the fleet and tells them that hide-and-seek is underway and laser tag is starting in a few minutes. While all the Mandos, giddy with excitement, hop into the shuttles heading down to the surface, Woves stays behind to play a game of Battleship. Mando has R5 help him clear the way as he closes in on where he thinks Fring is hiding, fighting off the enemy team's base defenders. R5 gets caught helping Din cheat, but not before Mando makes it to the other team's base. Mando finds a bunch of Fring clones that he was using to cheat at the game, so Mando evens the game by destroying the clones. Ho pulls out the Darksaber so she can strike a cringy pose as the Mandalorians blast headlong into a heated match of laser tag. Mando finds the Moff's hiding place where Fring is bitching about losing his clones who are apparently force sensitive, and Mando says, oops. Mando and Gustavo get it on fair and square, but the Moff has one final cheat to pull, the Praetorian Guards. Grogu steps in and says,
no,
means
no,
and draws the Praetorians away. They dismember IG-12, and Baby Yoda runs away without moving his arms, like that weirdo in 4th grade PE class. Things are heating up between Mando and Gideon as both vie to be crowned hide-and-seek champion when strong woman Ho comes in and saves Mando, of course. Grogu gets knocked down by the guards, but Mando saves him, and then Grogu saves him by using the force he just remembered he had, and the two work together to eliminate the guards from the game. Woves comes screaming down toward the surface, bragging about how he won the game of Battleship. Yeah, sure looks like you won. Gideon, sore loser that he is, destroys the Darksaber, and then Mando steps in and saves Ho in a big step towards gender equality. Blinded by his celebrations, Woves realizes he's going to crash into everybody, so he jumps ship so he won't get blamed. The ship's explosion seemingly kills the Moff, and Grogu, suddenly chock full of force powers, saves the Mandos. 10 seconds later, the Mandalorians are reinitiating their cult in the living waters, pouring White Claw on the miners being inducted, and Mando, being the good father figure he is, offers his child to the cult. Down below the waters, the Mythosaur awakens, and that's it. The Mandalorians have already brought back the Olympics, and they pass the torch to Ho, who uses it to reignite the Great Forge. Jumping off-world, we follow Mando to the beachside tiki bar the lazy New Republic is calling a base, and we see Dave Filoni's ego accidentally spilled over into the shot. Mando offers to take jobs from the New Republic hunting down the Imperial Remnant, and Greef Karga thanks Mando by giving him a timeshare for 5 whole days. Mando kicks his feet up and takes a load off after not doing anything for half the season, and the episode comes to an end. Well, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide if this episode was a great watch or a hate watch. However, this one was another debate watch to finish off a season full of debate watches. While this episode was okay, it doesn't save the season, and it certainly doesn't excuse or explain a lot of this season's decisions. Despite some cool moments and shots, this was a pretty lackluster finale that failed to deliver on even this season's own story beats, let alone reaching the level it needed to undo the damage done by the rest of the season. One major positive was that out of nowhere, the story shifted back to really focusing on Din and Grogu. Seeing them interact and work together, even in this limited period of time, was great. But it's also bittersweet to think that this whole season could have been full of these kinds of moments. But some moron at Disney decided we needed to see Strong Woman Bo have one of the most flat, uninteresting character arcs ever. The action scenes were mostly decent. The jetpack scene was a cool idea, and I know it's supposed to be reminiscent of scenes from the Clone Wars, but in practice, it looked pretty cringy at times, and more like the characters were doing Marvel superhero poses. The Praetorian Guards also just missed the mark. Their movements are just too slow and they don't seem as menacing as the show wants them to feel. The ship combat, limited as it was fantastic as always, and the dueling between the Mandos and Gideon was good for the most part, as was Din's fighting with the troopers earlier on. We felt that this episode better incorporated more typical Star Wars humor into the mix. It's always annoying to hear people say, well, Star Wars has always had humor, when excusing some bad, ill-fitting attempt at a joke in Star Wars. Star Wars has had humor like this, with funny interactions between droids or subtle offhanded comments in the midst of tense scenes. It was never your mom jokes and slapstick comedy sketches. So this episode handled that part of Star Wars well. Also, visually, I liked Mando's little house on the prairie at the end. I thought it looked exactly like the kind of Star Wars homesteading you see in games and the wider Star Wars universe. All of the usual type of nonsensical sequences typical of Disney Star Wars reared their ugly heads again in this episode, violating any sense of logic and storytelling structure. Right off the bat, after setting the stakes so high with Din's capture in the last episode, he breaks free 30 seconds later 50 feet down the hall. And how was Grogu able to just walk directly to him? What are all those troops who we later see engaging the Mandalorians doing at this time? Mando seriously doesn't even make it to the debriefing room? This would have been so much better with a scene where Gideon is interrogating Din, explaining his evil plans in actual detail. He even could have removed Din's helmet if Pedro Pascal wasn't even more checked out of this show than we are. And from a storytelling perspective, to build the tension up last week with Din's capture, just to completely drop the whole thing with him breaking free easier than getting away from a mall cop is inexcusable. Also, later on, Moff Gideon, who can track Din and Grogu's movements through the base, seemingly leaves to go hunt them down. But in reality, he actually just went out the back door of this room and waited behind it for them to arrive? And in that time, he wasn't hunting them down. They destroyed his precious clones without resistance. The culmination of all his work, the galaxy's first ever batch of Force-sensitive clones, the prized secret weapon of an Imperial warlord, destroyed with the press of a button, while he waited behind a door, probably with a stupid grin on his face. It just doesn't make any sense, but maybe that's the point. Maybe Disney has made a conscious decision that if you have even the slightest idea of common sense, you're too smart to buy their products, and they're making it so Disney Star Wars just isn't for us. The finale also seemed to drop the ball on a few things that were seemingly set up for them to slam home. First of all, the pluralization of the spies in the title from last week's episode is either a red herring, or a spy, or multiple spies, are still at large and inconsequential to the story. Also, if it wasn't going to play any part in this story outside of maybe inspiring one awkward, clunky conversation between Bo and the Armorer, why did we see the Mythosaur way back in episode 2? It served no real purpose, and they'd have been better off not showing it in episode 2 and having it be revealed here in the finale. But the biggest mistake that this episode makes is it gives viewers an easy out for the series. There was really nothing to entice viewers to come back for season 4, beyond of course those viewers who are here for mindless consumption. You can look at Mando kicking back with his feet up on his homestead with his kid and say, you know what? The Mandalorian story is done, and walk away from the show. Completely wrapping up Gideon's story without even really alluding to a larger threat, specifically to the Mandalorians, is a big mistake. And we're not even talking about a cliffhanger here, but just something that piques people's interest in coming back for another season of this show. From a lore perspective, in Star Wars Legends, making Force-sensitive clones was nearly impossible, and even if you pulled it off, they all ended up going insane. We were pretty numb to the supposedly big reveal this late in a bad season, but it was a little bizarre because in 2 episodes, Gideon went from a competent Imperial warlord with bad intentions to a megalomaniac trying to take over the galaxy with his own clones. So that's jarring to say the least. But getting back to the clones, this is a whole can of worms that Disney Star Wars needs to take a step back from. If any old semi-powerful Imperial warlord can pop out 20 Force-sensitive clones, it just opens up the entire Star Wars timeline to the question, well, why didn't so-and-so just make some Force clones? It's just another example of Disney tripping over their own ass, destroying good, already established Star Wars stories with their terrible, nonsensical stories. Also, Gideon's death was pretty meh. It's too open-ended since his armor can stop all of the things it did, but apparently not this wave of flame. We just saw Din take a pretty substantial flow of molten flame earlier without even his robes catching fire, so why are we supposed to assume Gideon died? Also, he had a jetpack. I just discovered this as I was writing this, but his jetpack actually disappears between shots and there's no explanation for it. In fact, his jetpack comes and goes throughout his fights with Mando and Bo, but we already put out a separate video on that, so check that out if you're interested. And this just goes to show you the attention to detail and the level of care these people are putting into Star Wars. They can't even keep their props consistent or explain why they're missing in the next shot. Disney makes it very clear that they will never care about Star Wars as much as the average fan does. Other than all that, there's plenty of little nitpicks with the episode as well. So, the Mandalorians really just retook all of Mandalore and they only lost Paz Vizsla? What happened to all of the TIE interceptors and TIE bombers? Does anyone really care at this point? Whatever. Someone should really edit this season down to the first 2 episodes, the last 2 episodes, and the 5 minutes of actual important material in every other episode. It would play a lot better than what we got here. All in all, this was really a nothing burger of a finale, with quite a bit of nonsense, and it gave people no real reason to come back next season. Were you expecting more out of this finale? What, if anything, is keeping you interested in returning for a 4th season? Let us know in the comments below. Please remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for a complete season review and a video of the funniest clips from this season of The Mandalorian. Also, be on the lookout for a new installment in the How They Tried to Trick Us series after this roller coaster of a season. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.